Okay, so for this lesson, we are going to be solving radical equations algebraically. So that just means we are going to solve these radical equations, or just square root equations, and we're going to do that by solving them like we would solve any other equation. So important things to know for us is that if we square a square root, you just get what's underneath the square root. So the square root of the cloud squared is just equal to the cloud. So for example, if you have the square root of x squared, you just get x. The square root of x plus 3 squared is equal to x plus 3. The same could go for cubic roots. If you take the cube root cubed, you just get what's under the sign, the radical sign. So let's look at square root of x minus 6 equals 4. So we're going to add 6 to both sides, just like we would if this was x minus 6 equals 4. But we're going to get the square root of x is equal to 10. Now, to get x by itself, we have to square both sides. So I'm going to take the square of the square root of x is just x, and 10 squared is 100. Okay, for the next example, the opposite operation for us is to subtract 6 from both sides. We're going to get the square root of x is equal to negative 2. So you might be thinking, well, Coach, we're just going to square both sides, and that would be our answer. But what's important to remember about square roots, if we think about our parent graph of the square root of x, it starts at 0 and goes to infinity. On the x-axis, it starts at 0 and goes to infinity on the y-axis. So the domain here is from 0 to infinity. The range here is from 0 to infinity. And so in both of these cases, the square root is never negative. So the square root can never be negative 2. So for these situations, we would say that this has no solution. Okay, let's look at example 3. So 3 has a plus 2 on the very end. All right, we need to add this over first. That's the very first step we ought to do. And we get 3x plus 5 is equal to positive 1. Now I'm looking at this line. I'm saying, hey, I need to undo this square root to isolate the x. So I'm going to square both sides to undo that square root. It's just going to leave me with 3x plus 5. Since I squared the left side, I have to square the right side. 1 squared is 1. Now I have just a two-step equation. I need to subtract the 5 and divide by 3. So I'm going to do that here. All right, subtract 5. That's going to give me 3x equals negative 4. When we divide by 3 to get x by itself, we get negative 4 over 3. Okay, and then our last example here, we have the square root on both sides of the equal sign. So I have a square root here and I have a square root here. What I need to do first is get rid of those square roots. So I'm going to square both sides to get rid of the square root. That's going to get the square root and the square to cancel. And we're just left with what's under the square root, which is 4x minus 7 and 3x plus 9. So here, we're going to subtract 3x from both sides. X minus 7 is equal to 9. And then we're going to add 7 to both sides. And we get x is equal to positive 16.